Only 2 more weeks of the NFL's 2020 season left to go, and they're shaping up to be pretty exciting because we've got some good playoff battles. We've got some exciting quarterbacks cropping up. Marcus Mariota back in our collective conscious. What else could we ask for? Let's dive on in, break down Week 15, and let you know whose stock is rising as we enter the final 2 weeks of the year. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor for numberFire.com. Brandon, Week 15 was a fun one. We saw Marcus Mariota playing pretty well. We saw Jalen Hurts showing a really good ceiling that I underestimated. And Tony Pollard got to play and played really well. What were the big takeaways for you for Week 15? How you doing?
I'm good. Big takeaways for me. I mean, you got Mariota under, it's never good when anyone gets hurt, but at least it's a groin injury for Derek Carr. It's not anything more
I'm
severe.
sure he doesn't feel the same way.
But I mean, it's not like a
right. Yeah, it's not a knee. It's not
Achilles or
exactly. Yeah.
But Chris Conley scored.
Yeah.
Not that means anything, but it means everything to me.
Baker played well, which means a lot to me. Jared Goff
was outplayed by Sam Darnold.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, everything was going well. I just pretty much clicked the lock button on Tony Pollard. I had a lot of Cowboys defense, so I started off hot, but by the time Cam Akers came around, everything cooled off a bit.
I just had a massive headache from like 11 o'clock on because it was around then we found out the Dolphins news with Mike Gesicki, Devontae Parker, and Jakeem Grant all being out. And I hand build lineups Sunday morning so that I can get the Shefty bombs Saturday night and know who's going to play. Because if you have that information, you've got a good idea of who's going to play. So I'm filling out lineups, starting around 8 a.m. And my assumption is that we're going to have Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki, but no Jakeem Grant. I'm like, cool, that's the optimal scenario for Lynn Bowden. Feeling good about that. No big news at running back. I'm good to go. Then the Dolphins news comes out, and then 2 minutes later, Zeke Elliott is inactive, and I have to undo everything. I have to basically just go through and hand edit everything because I'm like, okay, I was building under the wrong assumptions, and it changes everything about the way I building lineups. It made my lineups a lot better. So it meant that I got to use Lynn Bowden less because we had Tony Pollard. It meant I got to use less of Christian Kirk, less of Jacob Hollister who scored a touchdown. It was beneficial, but just that throbbing stress headache from 11:20 on, and it never went away because the Cam Akers game started, and that just made it all worse. Yeah,
it's reminiscent of pretty much most NBA locks, honestly, where that's all it is. But
I don't play, I'm not big into NBA for this reason. I don't want this stress. I value my mental sanity, and I'm not. Week 15 wasn't good for it.
Yeah, and I've been saying this a lot, but I have been struggling on Sunday mornings adjusting. I try to wait for as much information as I can before I really start building. But by that point, I mean, I've been breaking this down since Monday morning of of that week, like we're about to do now. And so I have these ideas in my mind. It's I think David Montgomery is a great play. Come Sunday, I'm like, oh, I got to get Tony Pollard. I like Cam Akers. Alvin Kamara's trending up. I kind of forget about how much I liked David Montgomery, even though nothing changed for him.
Right.
And I also didn't adjust enough for Matthew Stafford.
That was the other thing too for me. Yeah, I think, so it got me on Marvin Jones, which was good. It got me on Deandre Swift a bit, not as much as I should have.
It got me on TJ Hawkinson, unfortunately.
Yeah, I had some Hawkinson too. But it got me to use those guys. It should have got me to use Ryan Tannehill. Because we talked about that. We talked about that on Thursday. If Stafford plays, we would use the passing game. No, obviously we prefer Derrick Henry. But I think that I made a couple of mistakes this week. I know why. I know why certain decisions I made, so I don't view those as being mistakes. But I think the Stafford one was an actual mistake. And, I'm not going to beat myself up over it. But, it's good to remember that, I need to adjust for news as it comes in. I feel like with the Stafford news specifically, I didn't adjust enough. I did adjust because it got me on Marvin Jones, DeAndre Swift a bit. But, I should have adjusted more.
Yeah, and I mean – we're going to talk about market shares and injuries and opportunities, and then we'll talk on Thursday about game environments and game stacks. But another part of building good daily fantasy lineups is thinking about that stuff at the last minute and saying, you know what, I'm going to play Ryan Tannehill because nobody's really on him. Everyone's looking at other quarterbacks.
Yeah.
It's a big part of it. And I think that's where I struggle the most.
And there's a big advantage to it. I was hosting the World Fantasy Football Championship yesterday, and the person who finished second, Chipotle Addict, had Ryan Tannehill. They basically game stacked Titans Lions without Derrick Henry, which was brilliant.
Yeah,
and then the winner,
something that we talk about is it's such an
We've
easy
talked
way to
about that
differentiate.
3 or 4 weeks in a row doing that. And I didn't do it because I'm very stupid. So congratulations to them. The person who finished third was the only person in the field who used David Montgomery. Like, they were the only one out of 80. So there's big advantages to keeping yourself grounded, make sure you're adjusting to late news, and still we talk about manually ranking running backs, still do that even if there's late breaking news. I mean, for Tony Pollard, obviously you were right to put him in the top 3, but make sure you are including David Montgomery, et cetera, et cetera. Let's start things off here with the Thursday game, the Chargers and the Raiders. Again, not the reason we want it to happen, but Marcus Mariota is back. Had some bad throws, to be sure, but went off. He was efficient for the most part, led the Raiders offense to some points. What'd you see here?
Yeah, a lot of good from Marcus Mariota. Derek Carr left after 11 snaps with a groin injury, and he's expected to miss at least, I saw 10 to 14 days, so that would put him out at least one more week, if not 2. So right now, this is Mariota's offense. In this game, Mariota was pretty good overall. 0.33 passing net expected points per drop back. NFL average is 0.13 leading into this weekend.
No.
I know.
Ryan Finley. He hasn't played yet. Sorry, Ryan. My bad.
No, well, it was actually 0.13 leading into the weekend.
Oh, man. I didn't adjust.
Yeah.
What a
noob. Saying 0.14 like some jabronis, but
gosh. Get out of here, Jim.
Either way, Mariota, 2 to 3 times the NFL average in expected points per dropback added. If you remove his one costly interception, which is not fair, he was at 0.6. So he was very good aside from, that pick, which again, not fair, but I like to at least see what happens maybe on just the pass attempts.
Yeah, because you want to see the juice. So
didn't get sacked, which
is rare for him.
Yeah, I was going to say
no, it's definitely his biggest issue.
So that'll help. The offense, that helps from an expected point standpoint. His ADOT was 8.1 yards downfield, so his average throw went 8.1 yards from the line of scrimmage. Derek Carr's is 7.9 on the full season, so pretty similar there. And the targets from Mariota specifically were fixated on Darren Waller at 12 of 28. Only Nelson Aguilar's 6 were also above 2 from Mariota. Aguilar came in with an 11.8 yard ADOT, 2 of 6 downfield targets from Mariota. Waller had 3 of those. Waller then seems like the biggest winner here based on the target shares, but I do think that Aguilar remains in the conversation for tournaments due to the downfield throws that go his way. Hasn't connected on a lot of them lately, but they are there. I think Henry Ruggs is eligible to return next week, which would shake things up a little bit.
He was Tuesday, I think he was placed on it. And was he a close contact or a positive test?
He had to quarantine for 5 days.
Okay, so yeah, he's good. Yeah.
Cool. So I kind of like this passing offense, at least with Aguilar and Darren Waller, who I've been too low on this season. Josh Jacobs in a close game jumped up to a 68% snap rate from 43% a week ago. Had 26 rushes, 3 total targets. We've seen him get roughly this workload, which is very good when he's healthy. So when he's back on the main slate, which isn't until week 17, if they're still relevant by then, I would be in on Jacobs.
But it's also a 3-game slate on Saturday, which is pretty good. So,
well, yeah, I'm just saying,
so we
as
can
for a main slate goes.
Yeah.
But they host the Dolphins on Saturday night. So that should be
Mariota Tua. Let's go. Oh, man. This is my Super Bowl.
Yeah. Justin Herbert keeps trending back up. He had a really hot start to this game, wound up with 314 yards, 2 touchdowns, ran 4 times, including a touchdown. This was despite not having Keenan Allen and Mike Williams at full health. Allen played just 36% of the snaps. Williams was at 42%. So that left Jalen Guyton to play 80%, Tyron Johnson to play 59%. The real beneficiary here is actually Hunter Henry, another case of probably not overthinking it and being like Hunter Henry should benefit from this, not just the receivers. He had 7 targets to lead the team. He scored. Jalen Guyton had 6 targets. Johnson had 5, including a touchdown. Guyton caught a late 53-yard bomb, nearly scored on it. But, given all this, given that Allen and Williams did play, I would assume that they're good enough to go next week against the Broncos. So that would put Keenan back at number 1 in this offense. And then we got to see some more frustrating usage for Austin Eckler, who's a big touchdown regression candidate. It's hard to score when they do bring in Kalen Ballage at the goal line, though. But carries inside the 10 since week 12 when Eckler returned. Eckler does have 5 to lead the team. He also has a target from inside the 10. Herbert has 4. Joshua Kelly and Kalen Ballage have 3. So it's a little tough to love Eckler as the guy in close, but it's not like he's only getting touches in between the 20s. Just hasn't really scored. 62% of the snaps, 13 carries, 4 targets. So I still like him, but he does have those touchdown issues. Again, they host the Broncos next week. So, Arrow's still about the same on Eckler for me, I would say overall.
Yeah. Name that salary for Eckler against Denver. Because I agree with you. Like everything you said was spot on as far as like the issues that he has. But I feel like it's still a valuable role. Also, like with the snap rate being down, I think that was in part because he was hurt going in. They said he might have a limited role. He didn't have as much of a limited role as Keenan and Mike Williams, but still worthwhile. Do you know the Sunday Million open? Sorry, I kind of sprung that on you. I would say Eckler, after you consider the touchdown issues, is worthy of about 79-ish. Do you agree?
Oh, wait. Are you asking if I had the slate open?
Yeah.
Because I don't, but I could still name a salary.
Okay, name that salary then.
I wouldn't go that high.
Okay.
I think that's if he had a red zone role, that'd be.
I think if he had a red zone role, he'd be
if he was converting touchdowns, I'd put him closer to 75 still.
Okay, well he's 7,000, so it doesn't really matter. We're both higher on him than consensus, and I think that even while acknowledging that the touchdowns are an issue that will not go away, still something we want to buy. With that Raiders passing offense, I think that the encouraging thing with them is that they did this, but also they did it without Henry Ruggs. And we talked a lot about how Henry Ruggs, despite not getting targets, is a difference maker for this team. Opens up a lot of stuff for Waller and for Aguilar. So I would say I'd agree with you. It's a tough match with the Dolphins for sure, but we shouldn't fully abandon ship on them with Ruggs likely back the next week. Let's move now to Buffalo at Denver. Again, Denver is facing Los Angeles next week, so relevant for that most recent team. The Broncos defense missing a lot of pieces here, but even after you account for that, you still got to hand it to Josh Allen. He finished with 0.56 passing net expected points per dropback, and now he likely gets John Brown back next week. He's very clearly in that top tier quarterback with a great range of outcomes, and it'll get better when John Brown is back. I think that one of the issues I had with the Saturday slate is I didn't account enough for the upside gap between Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers. I should have accounted more for that. That was a mistake I made. Josh Allen will always be one of the highest upside quarterbacks in the slate. When it's just 4 quarterbacks, even higher. So I need to adjust for that too.
I had I think I swapped off the nut lineup for to get cute, and I played Drew Lock, but I had everyone who went off in my initial lineup because I just did a single entry. But
maybe you need to mute me when I talk about the Broncos going forward, just so you don't hear my Drew Lock fanboyism coming through.
I think I'm gonna blame you.
Yeah. You can mute me on the program we're using, so I'll let you do that right now. Stephan Diggs had a scare with a foot injury, but it sounds like he'll be okay. He had 13 targets here. Cole Beasley had 10. That's his 3rd straight game in double digits. Diggs gets a couple fewer targets when Brown is healthy, but the offense is more efficient, so that's a plus for him. I think it's a wash effectively with Brown's back, but Beasley slides into a smaller role. But again, if Brown misses more time in the future, Cole Beasley is a really, really good fantasy option, and that's something that has been a major change this year. I've been very happy to use Cole Beasley pretty often. I would not overreact to Devin Singletary's touchdown here. It was fun. He was very slow, but it was fun. Zach Moss out-carried him 13-8, and the game was out of reach by that point. So there's still a lot of backfield we want to target, and if it's a shorter slate, I'd still prefer Moss there. Drew Lock came back to earth and then some after a good game last week. He had negative 0.29 passing net expected points per dropback. That's what he is. He's volatile. The lows will hit more often than the highs. So that's something you just have to keep in mind whenever you want to use him or use Broncos players. Noah Fant had a big role here. He had 11 targets. Nobody else had more than 5. Locke also threw deep just twice in the game, which is in line with last week where he kept things closer but didn't play as well as he did that time. Fant has some volatility in his usage, but he does have 7 and 11 targets his past 2 full games, excluding the flu game for him. That's enough to make him in play. But if Fant's going to get targets, that makes it tougher for Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler to come through, especially when you add in the inefficiencies of the offense. So I am going to downgrade them. They're just kind of too many mouths to feed for an inefficient offense. I'm not crossing them off, to be clear, because like Hamler and Jeudy specifically have crazy low salaries every week. But I need a good game environment to be into them. Maybe that is against the Chargers. That's very possible, but they're worth downgrading. Melvin Gordon scored twice. Go ahead.
I thought you were done. I was just looking at totals. I mean, what would you put the total at for next week for Broncos Chargers?
So the Broncos secondary issues will still be in place. I feel like it's going to have a lower total than it should because it's within, like if we're mapping out ranges of outcomes, it's within the range of outcomes for the Broncos to score nothing. So I would say it deserves like 48.
It's 50 with a 3-point spread, which is
okay. Man, bookmakers justifiably hate the Chargers. I've been working with my own numbers. I haven't been able to they were kind of a mid-season project, so I haven't been able to add in like a coaching adjustment, which a lot of very intelligent people who we talk to on covering the spread do. It has the Chargers as a value every week. It's worked the past 2 weeks, but it's very scary and I hate it. So we need to make that adjustment in the offseason. But I'm guessing it'll say the same thing again this week. Melvin Gordon scored twice, revenge game next week, but the backfield was still split. He had 11 carries and 4 targets. That is 19 adjusted opportunities. Philip Lindsay had 11 and 3. That's 2 spread out for full slates. Gordon is preferred on shorter slates, but nothing you really want to attack there all that much. But let's talk about the Broncos pass catchers because we've been in on Jerry Jeudy for a long time. I've been kind of in on KJ Hamler at times. Are you also going to downgrade them now that Fant is healthy and more relevant again?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those teams where no market shares particularly stand out, and we're dealing with just low efficiency. I mean, I would go with Fant, obviously, number one, but I've played a lot of Jerry Jeudy this year. His salary is only $5,200 for next week. I think that's really enticing. I might need that. I haven't obviously broken down the slate. It's a 10-game slate, so just fewer shots for actual value opening up. But I'm not completely off of someone like Jeudy just for the ability to get downfield work, but it's mostly just Fant from this offense for me.
Yeah, I think that we have to lower them, but not cross them off. Let's move now to the Sunday night game or Saturday night game, which was super disappointing because Aaron Jones was great, but the passing game was weirdly off, I think is the way that I'd phrase it. What'd you see here between the Panthers and the Packers?
Yeah, I mean, it was 21-3 at the half for the Packers, and it ended up 24-16. So not a whole lot of second half action for the Packers. That can kind of happen whenever your rushing game's good. Aaron Jones had 12 first half carries for 114 yards and a touchdown, finished with 20 carries, 145 yards and a touchdown, 4 targets for 13 yards. Played 90% of the snaps, though, because Jamal Williams left with a quad injury early on. That would vault Jones way up for me. He had been in the 60% snap range, so I would be I'm historically lowish on Aaron Jones because he needs the right game to sort of hit his ceiling. He can hit that a lot easier if he's going to play such a high rate of snaps, and A.J. Dillon was not a factor.
I'm just so annoyed that game is not in the main slate next week. They get the Titans. I would stack the poo out of that game. It stinks. Yeah.
But look, I'm still higher on Jones. It's gonna be a great single game slate, though. No.
I've lost my enthusiasm for single game. I love single game. I love every slate. They're all great. I'm gonna mute myself now. So get fired.
Even with the low volume, Davante Adams got to 10 targets because he's Davante Adams and he's very, very good. He had just 42 yards and 7 catches, though. Allen Lazard had 6 targets. Jones had 4. Robert Tonyan had 3 with a touchdown. If you look at the past 5 games with Devontae and Allen Lazard healthy, Devontae has 30% of the targets, which is 9.8 per game. Combining his downfield targets, which are targets that travel at least 16 yards downfield, and red zone targets, he averages 3 of those per game. But then it's Allen Lazard and Robert Tonyan at 14% of the targets. Their weighted target numbers, accounting for that leverage, is just like 5.5 per game. So, I mean, really good offense, but honestly, it just flows through Devontae and potentially now Aaron Jones if he's the primary healthy back here. So I think I'd probably go Tonyan second just because he's a tight end in an elite offense. Then Lazard, Marquez Valdes-Scantling is not doing it for me. As you mentioned, they play the Titans on Sunday night, which will be a great game. Just unfortunately not on the main slate. For the Panthers, we got DJ Moore back after a 1-game absence. He came back with a big game, 131 yards and 8 targets. 3 of his targets and 32 yards came against Jair Alexander. You would think that he might have got just shadowed or faced Alexander on everything, but it wasn't really the case. Curtis Samuel did out-target him 9-8, but had just 42 yards despite similar ADOTs. If you look at this team, since Curtis Samuel's role improvement, but only in the games where Samuel, Moore, and Anderson were all healthy, Robbie Anderson leads with 23% of the targets. Samuel and Moore are both at 21%. So it is pretty concentrated. Nobody particularly stands out. The high leverage looks favor DJ Moore. He's averaging 2.3 downfield targets per game in this, I think, 7-game sample. Anderson's at 2. Samuel has 1.3 with a red zone target per game. So they're all involved, but nobody's really the guy to me, so that kind of hurts them. Teddy's been very efficient, but doesn't throw a whole lot of touchdowns for some reason. So, that
because he runs for too many. Teddy Bridgewater, who runs like a baby deer, runs for too many touchdowns. I can't watch him run because it makes me so uncomfortable.
Yeah, and after his injury, I just worry.
Right. I mean, he did that in college too, though. Like, it's like wobble legs. It's very strange.
His touchdown rate, though, really should be higher than it is. I've been doing a lot of work with that for regression candidates each week on numberFire. But, it's maybe just a 1-year blip. It might overcorrect down the stretch. I don't know. But, good target shares, efficient offense. Hasn't necessarily led to much from Mike Davis. Played 54% of the snaps, 14 carries, 2 targets, just 61 total yards, no touchdowns. He really seems to have hit a wall around week 6, which is, cherry picking, but it's also kind of, he's not.
He had a fumble there too, though. Like, I think that
I tuned out. I won't lie. But either way.
No, I mean, like, I know that drops and fumbles don't actually matter, but they matter when they result to changes in your role. And it kind of seems like it may have happened for Davis.
Well, either way.
Yeah.
Didn't like Mike Davis, so if I did, I would have just dug past it. But 20.8 adjusted opportunities per game, which is carries plus 2x targets, 3.3 red zone rushes, but just 66 scrimmage yards per game. Since again hitting that wall in games without McCaffrey. So like, however you'd want to spin it, even if you said he's going to get more work, he just hasn't really been there for me. So I don't have any interest in Mike Davis on a full slate.
I hope we get Christian McCaffrey back for that game. I know that he wouldn't have a full role, but I just want to use him one more time this year. I've missed him a lot. So we'll see how that one goes on Sunday. Speaking of Sunday, let's move now. And speaking of fumbles costing you playing time, Tony Pollard getting the chance here with Ezekiel Elliott. He's not benched. He has a calf injury, but the fumbles should have eventually led to that. And Pollard took advantage. He, from a yardage perspective, was bailed out by a big late touchdown, but he had 12 carries and 9 targets, which is 30 adjusted opportunities. He had 132 yards in scrimmage. So if Zeke misses more time, we would want to be aggressive with Tony Pollard. But if it seems more likely that he plays next week, which would put Pollard back in the garage. So it was a good little 1-week fling. Hopefully you got on Tony Pollard. If Zeke misses more time, if they decide to shut him down, then Tony Pollard is real good. Michael Gallup hurt his hip during the game and left. One of the issues with the Cowboys is that their targets aren't concentrated enough, and losing Gallup would alleviate part of that. CeeDee Lamb had 9 targets with 2 deep. Amari Cooper had just 3, but it's a 1-game sample there. I wouldn't actively seek out the Cowboys pass catchers if Gallup were to miss time, but it would make me more open to using Lamb and Cooper if the game is good enough. Raheem Mostert was active but left with an ankle injury. Jeff Wilson, ankle injury as well. He had 16 carries and 4 targets. Didn't catch any of those targets, though. I would be okay with him if Mostert were to miss time, but it's hard to get too jazzed about a player in this offense. So, yeah, you can use Wilson, just keep expectations in check. And again, he also hurt his ankle late in the game. So his backfield's kind of a mess. George Kittle being back would be a boon for everyone here, though. So hopefully Kittle comes back. But it's rough. Speaking of rough, Nick Mullins hurt his elbow. So CJ Beathard took over. Mullins has been struggling, but they've stuck with him. And I think that says something about Beathard and their confidence level in Beathard. And Beathard struggled when he got a starting gig in the past. So this would be another potential downgrade to the team if Mullins can't go. Again, I know Mullins hasn't been good, but there's a reason they've been starting him. The only guy I feel good about using here is Brandon Ayuk. He had another 13 targets here. So in the games without Kittle and Debo, he is at 14, 16, and 13. Kittle may be back next week, and I'd still be high on Ayuk if Kittle were back, just not quite as high. And I'd downgrade him a bit more if Samuel were to play. Kendrick Bourne, 86 yards and a touchdown, but it came on a meaningless play and just 4 targets. So I wouldn't account for that. It's just Ayuk here, unless Kittle comes back, or if we get Wilson without Mostert. But the injury situation for the 49ers is just really grim. Brandon, let's say hypothetical world, there's no Zeke next week. Name that salary for Tony Pollard. We're not going to get it because, I'm just curious based on his role. What would you think his salary would be?
Still offensive issues, and part of what got him as many fantasy points as he did was a long touchdown run. So I'd want to keep it in check. If I said 75 for Eckler, I don't know, let's just say 75.
I'd say 8,000. I think that because there are fewer goal line concerns, I can put him above. He gets targets too. I think he's Eckler with a little bit more goal line work on a worse team.
Yeah, the worst team is a big factor for me.
For sure. But that's how good his role was on Sunday. So if we get him without Zeke again, just go nuts, I think. It's also, they play it's that Saints-Vikings on Friday.
No, they play the Eagles.
Oh, yeah, cool. So we would have him on the main slate. 64, you said?
63.
Cool. So Zeke, rest up, baby, and we'll see you 2021. Let's move now to the Falcons and the Bucks. I used more Bucks than I should have, and that did not help with my pre-lock headache by any means, but I wound up being okay. We had talked in the podcast about how Mike Evans hadn't got to 100 yards, but the building blocks were there, and oh baby did he hit it, but he didn't get a touchdown for the first time in his life. So what'd you see here?
Yeah, the Falcons crumbled again against Tom Brady. I think that's
sorry,
sorry,
Falcons fans. Should have told you to mute this part. My bad. I'm sure they've heard this enough, so I feel bad for them.
Yeah.
Poor Falcons fans.
Yeah. The Bucks hit halftime with no points, 17-0 deficit. They won 31-27. Tom Brady threw 45 times in comeback mode, hit 390 yards with 2 touchdowns. He had 0.38 passing net expected points per dropback. He's shown the ability to be efficient. This was only his second matchup against a weak pass defense since week 9 when the team added Antonio Brown. And we might differ on this, but I don't think it mattered that much overall. Leonard Fournette lucked into some touchdowns, got to 20 FanDuel points, but behind him, Antonio Brown got to 17.8, which is not a bad number by any means, but it's not great. And Mike Evans did get tackled inside the 5 twice. Had 14 FanDuel points.
Could have had 26.
Could have. This just encapsulates my fear. And I did a whole trend on this team on Thursday about how they're efficient, but I can't really love any of the target shares. It's just kind of it was like the best case scenario, all that passing, just the 2 touchdowns, unfortunately, for Brady. But, almost 400 passing yards, and there weren't 20-point games from anyone. Brown got close, but again, that's not something that's bankable. He's not doing that every week. That's just where I am with the Bucks. Evans, Brown, and Rob Gronkowski each had 7 targets to tie for the team lead here. Evans had 2 downfield targets. He's the one that we prefer on this podcast. His overall target share, though, since week 9 with Brown on the team is just 20%. He is averaging 2.3 downfield targets, 1.8 red zone targets. So he's the clear number 1, but he's also not a traditional DFS wide receiver 1 by any means to me with a 20% target share. So Yeah, he could have erupted, but he didn't.
He's not soured like a wide receiver traditional one either, though.
That was the thing. Yeah. That's the difference. But
playing in the dome next week.
Yeah. I don't know. We're going to have to go over that again. Leonard Fournette, after being a healthy scratch last week, played 66% of the snaps with no Ronald Jones, had just 65 yards on 14 carries and 5 targets. So that's a solid adjusted opportunity number with 24, especially at his salary. But if not for the touchdowns, he would have busted. That's not totally fair, but it's true. Maybe I'm too low on like 14 to 18 point fantasy point days, but
I mean, like for Evans though, the building blocks were there. Again,
I know the building blocks are there. The building blocks have been there. I
don't think the building blocks are there for anyone else.
Right.
I think they are for him.
Yes.
I think he is the exception in this offense.
Yes.
I agree with you for Godwin and Brown though.
Okay. They play at Detroit on Saturday, so that'll be a good one.
Didn't Mike Evans? No, he missed that game on Saturday last year. That was the game where Will Fuller got hurt, like on the second play. Good times.
I don't know. You have too good a memory about Will Fuller things. So
only when it tilts me, or I guess when he has like 6 touchdowns too. But
yeah. The Falcons they're not really a catch-up team, but they're kind of close to that. Matt Ryan threw 49 times despite their early lead, 356 yards, 3 touchdowns. Just barely league average efficiency. Both Todd Gurley and Brian Hill had negative rushing yards in this game. So the backfield's is terrible for DFS. And another game without Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley got everything he could handle, basically 14 targets, 163 yards, and a touchdown. Had 5 downfield targets. Russell Gage had 10 targets for 68 and a touchdown. Hayden Hurst had 5 for 21 and the other touchdown. In games without Julio Jones or with him limited, leaving early, Calvin Ridley honestly might have like the best workload in football or close to it. 27% of the targets. It's not the highest target share in a relevant sample, but it's 10.3 targets per game, 4.3 downfield targets per game, over 1 red zone target per game. He's very, very good, and they get him the ball without Julio. So the offense isn't great, but Ridley's pretty phenomenal. Gage himself is kind of solid for being where he's salaried. 17% of the targets, some downfield work, red zone work, over 1 target per game for each of those. So I think he's a viable option without Julio. He's not someone I will necessarily build around, but I think he's in play. Hurst is at 12% of the targets. I struggle with him because he's actually had some 50-yard games because the team just throws a lot. Just doesn't really separate from the pack at tight end, but they're at Kansas City next week, so
come on, Julio.
Yeah.
Suit up, baby, because like if we get Julio for that game, it is the best game on the main slate, no matter what. It'd be the bestest game if Julio plays. So let's get healthy, bud. Get back out there for sure. Yeah, I think with Tampa Bay, I'd agree with you where like it's just Mike Evans. I think I'm higher on Mike Evans than you are, but I agree he's the only one I want to use. And I can't disagree with Godwin and Brown. Like I don't have any real desire even, I guess, to get there. But they get
it's hard even though we have 10 games next week. They're not on the main slate, I know, but like even if they were one of the 10 games, it's really hard to get after guys who get like an 18% target share.
Yeah, I mean, because the downfield stuff is so good for Evan, that's why I don't care with him. But
I mean like Brown and Godwin.
Yeah, no, I don't. No desire. Think you've got what it takes to be the GOAT? Now you can prove it. FanDuel and Goat Fuel have teamed up to make those dreams a reality. In FanDuel's GOAT Gauntlet series, powered by Goat Fuel, fans will put their fantasy knowledge to the test by competing for a chance to take on the NFL's greatest of all time. Here's how it works. Over the course of the next 3 weeks, I guess now 1 week, sorry, forgot to update that, there will be another qualifier contest highlighting a specific position. I believe quarterback is left, and an NFL GOAT. The qualifying contest will award $75,000 in total cash prizes, Goat Fuel products, and a seat in the GOAT Gauntlet final to take home the ultimate prize. Those who win the qualifier contest or roster the highest scoring player for that week's highlighted position will be automatically entered into the finals, where they have a chance to play against 3 NFL GOATs, Jerry Rice, Emmitt Smith, and Warren Moon, and compete for their chance to win a share of $10,000 in cash prizes, Goat Fuel products, and an exclusive virtual meet and greet with the NFL Hall of Famers. For more details, visit FanDuel.com/GoatFuel. and download the FanDuel app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. And a guy who was almost the GOAT on Sunday at quarterback was Ryan Tannehill. Let's move now to the Lions at the Titans. And with Matthew Stafford playing, the appeal in this Titans passing attack went up and they went off. Tannehill, 5 total touchdowns, 2 of which were rushing, 0.91 passing net expected points per dropback. He is efficient enough where you kind of need to be high on him whenever you expect the game to stay close. Now, I think that stay close can be, I think that can be a bit vague. I think that what I would say is you expect the opposing team to score 20 to 25 points, green light on Ryan Tannehill. That's where he needs to get, where they need to get to. Because like this game wasn't really close, but the Lions did enough. So if you think the opposing team will score 20 to 25, 27 points, fire away Ryan Tannehill, and he has some rushing juice too. There was limited passing volume because they were so efficient, but the efficiency just made it so good that it didn't matter. Corey Davis, huge touchdown. He had 110 yards. That's his 5th 100-yard game this year. A.J. Brown has just 3, but he gets more touchdowns. So at their respective salaries, I still prefer Davis, but they're close to me, like straight up. So I'll just take the discount if offered it. I'm not going to not use A.J. Brown. I'm just saying if I'm using one, I'll take the discount on Corey Davis. Derrick Henry was his usual self, 24 carries and 2 targets. Darrington Evans scored a late touchdown. He had 8 carries and 2 targets, but Henry still had 28 adjusted opportunities, and most of Evans' work came late. So I think that this shows why we prefer Henry when the game stays like really close, because again, the Lions weren't really close at the end. Most of Evans' work came when things were out of reach. But I think that Henry also deserves a bump up when things are tight. Just the Titans offense in general gets bumped up when things are tight. Matthew Stafford left in the 4th quarter, but it seemed like that was just because the score was out of reach. But he played well. He averaged 0.46 passing net expected points per dropback. If he plays next week, I will have faith in this offense. And that bodes well for Marvin Jones, because Jones, 112 yards and a touchdown on 12 targets. Since Kenny Galladay's most recent injury in the games that he has played with Danny Amendola, Marvin Jones has 24% of the targets. He has double-digit targets in 3 of the 5 there. And he has multiple deep targets in 6 straight games. Clearly, we can use Jones at those marks and be pretty high on him. TJ Hawkinson had just 4 targets here. It's still 19% of the targets in that sample, so I wouldn't bump him down too much, especially for tight end. He's shown decent yardage upside. He gets red zone targets. So I'm fine with Hawkinson, but he is objectively oversalaried. You could say that about every tight end, but Jones is the preferred piece in this passing offense, and I do like him quite a bit. Deandre Swift had a nice role again. He had 15 carries, 15 carries and 5 targets, which is 25 adjusted opportunities. He also scored twice. One of those came after a fumble, which was good to see because if Matt Patricia were there, would DeAndre Swift just be locked in a dungeon? Potentially. He's still not perfect, but he's a good player and he can do a lot on the volume he does get. So if Stafford can't go, I would be skeptical of Swift, but he is back on the map. He had a good role here, and I think that bodes really well for him going forward. So very high on DeAndre Swift. Any other thoughts for you, Brandon, on DeAndre Swift as far as that one goes? Again, 25 adjusted opportunities. Thought it was a pretty good role for him in that one. Any disagreements for you with regards to him?
No, he's just one of those guys who I think is still probably a little more matchup dependent than I would like to admit. Play the Buccaneers next week, but it is on that 3-game slate. So, I mean, I like DeAndre Swift. It's great to see that he didn't get benched after a fumble because you should probably just get your best players involved. But so, yeah, I think same page, honestly, on just about everything in this game.
Okay, let's move on to Houston at Indy. Kiki Cutie lost a fumble for the 2nd consecutive week. I'm not mad. You're mad. What did you see in this one?
The Colts kind of did the Colts thing. 27-20 win. Felt like it was a very Coltsy game. By the end, Phillip Rivers was efficient. Jonathan Taylor got good volume now, which is kind of the new normal. He had 16 carries, 5 targets for 26 adjusted opportunities, 95 total yards, and a rushing touchdown. Most importantly to me, honestly, 70% snap rate. He was at 48% and 56% the past 2 games. So I made the joke on our snake draft show that Taylor might play 50% of the snaps. He didn't. he had been getting opportunities or similar adjusted opportunity numbers anyway, but the snap rate being up is definitely something that I love to see. In 4 games since week 11, when he sort of broke out, he's averaging 24.8 adjusted opportunities.
It was 24 going in.
Yeah, 24.8 adjusted opportunities. It's early. 127 yards per game, 3 red zone opportunities. Arrows up for me.
I also thought it was good that he got that 5-yard touchdown because like that was my big concern with him more so than the snap rate was red zone usage and like
Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, Jacoby Brissett and Nyheim Hines, the prototypical goal line back.
Yeah. So I think arrows way up on Taylor for me. So this sort of alleviated concerns. Of course, it can all come back down to about 50% of the snaps moving forward, but for now, arrows up. Rivers, once again, efficient. He's always efficient. 0.43 passing net expected points per drop back. Just doesn't lead to big games or predictable big games because he doesn't throw it deep often. Yeah, Zach Pascal had 2 touchdowns, but just 6 targets to tie for the team lead. T.Y. Hilton, all reliable against the Texans, didn't really come through. 71 yards, most of that came on a late catch, but since week 10 with Hilton healthy, he does lead the team in target share, but that's 19%. 2.3 downfield targets per game for him, almost a 13-yard ADOT. That's 6.7 targets per game total. The leverage helps a bit, but he's not a priority play to me. The only priority play for me and this team is Jonathan Taylor. I can't go to any other pass catchers. I'm not going to Michael Pittman. They play at the Steelers next week, which is not the best spot. So, I'll still use Taylor, but not phenomenal there. We saw some vintage David Johnson, though. You were in on that. I have to apologize to you.
Well, I was in on it until the Tony Pollard news happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
like it's fine because again, Tony Pollard is great. I can't regret that. But like, I had David Johnson limited exposure and then had none after the Tony Pollard news. I still think that was the right call, but like he played well.
I mean, it's about the process, not the results. Sure. I mean, results.
The process.
Only 8 carries for 27 yards, did not score, but had 11 catches on as many targets for 106 yards. So, receiving can help whenever rushing's not there, whenever you don't score a rushing touchdown. He had 16.1 FanDuel points from receiving alone with no touchdowns. So it was there. The issue for me is that he hadn't really flashed that at all. He had maxed out at 4 targets in a game all season. But in games without Duke Johnson now this season, he's at 21.8 adjusted opportunities per game. Shy of 11 carries, but 5.5 targets, 3 total downfield targets in the span, including 1 this week. So,
those first 3 games were against the Chiefs, Ravens, and Steelers. So, like, you kind of don't expect running backs to do anything there. And I thought that he played well here. So, the problem is, if Duke doesn't play, it doesn't matter. Or if Duke does play, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Tie myself up. The headache from yesterday is still there, apparently.
Is it an actual headache, or are you just like?
No, it was an actual headache. Like it was actually like, oh my gosh, like not a migraine, but like it was like, oh my gosh, my head actually physically hurts.
Okay. Brandon Cooks returned, tied with Kiki Cutie for 7 targets to lead the team. Neither of them cleared 60 yards, though. Only Cutie found the end zone between them. It's actually Chad Hansen getting the other score. He's been involved a little bit, at least getting downfield work, not necessarily overall targets. But in total, 5 Texans had at least 50 receiving yards. The salaries aren't that high, so that helps. It's a very different vibe than, say, the Buccaneers. I know the talent level of Mike Evans is not equal to something like Brandon Cooks, but the salaries here are lower, so that helps me. And I'm always good playing receivers who are paired with good quarterbacks, so I will be in on Brandon Cooks and Kiki Cutie moving forward, as long as their salaries remain relatively similar. Cutie actually leads now in the 2 games without Will Fuller with 20% of the targets, getting some downfield work, getting red zone work. Cooks is at 19%, so it's not great, but again, plays with a good quarterback. I wouldn't chase Chad Hansen. He has 13% of the targets, but 2 downfield targets per game. They play the Bengals next week, though. And I think I like this offense. If there's no Duke Johnson, I would consider Deshaun, Brandon Cooks, Kiki Cutie, and David Johnson in a matchup against the Bengals.
It might be tougher for me with Deshaun just because, like,
you need to be close.
Yeah.
But
it helps that the Houston offense is just a dumpster fire, but, like, I don't know if that matters.
The defense, right?
Did I say offense? I meant defense. Yeah, sorry. David Johnson.
I will not take anything against Deshaun.
Hypothetically, no, yeah, you shouldn't. You should fight me if I ever say that on purpose or on accident. Hypothetically, Duke sits. What would you pay for David Johnson next week?
Probably close to like 68 or 7,000 in that.
Yeah,
range.
I think 68 is roughly where I was at too. But he is 67, so not a value.
No.
But like he would be in play there. He'd be, like a rotational piece. So keep an eye on Duke and see what happens there. I thought you had more. Sorry. Let's move now to.
I was looking at. I popped over to the running back tab on FanDuel, and it's not looking that great. It's okay.
We have Cam Akers. Let's move now to New England at Miami. The Dolphins missing a bunch of dudes here, but they actually got the win and eliminated the Patriots from playoff contention. The Chad Pennington figurine on my desk is ecstatic about this development. Tua Tagovailoa finished with negative 0.06 passing net expected points per dropback, and it was a ton of short of stuff. But you expect that. With all the pieces that they were missing. I would not change my view of him based on that. And honestly, like, it might bump him up a hair knowing that the offense didn't bottom out with all those guys out. Like, the floor in the offense may be higher than I thought it was, which is good. Lynn Bowden led the team with 7 targets, but he fell victim to what we feared on the podcast. I said I wanted him to be paired with at least one of Devontae Parker or Mike Gesicki so that the offense would throw and be efficient. But everyone was out, which I thought was one of the worst scenarios for Bowden. He was fine, but it definitely was not a good situation. Hopefully those other guys are back this week because this isn't a team we want to use without them, and they could be really fun against Las Vegas if they play. So hopefully they're back next week. The Dolphins actually ran for 250 yards, which is both good and bad for Myles Gaskin. The good is that they can run effectively, and they're willing to do so. That's good. The bad is that those guys played well, and that was not the case the last time that Gaskin missed time. This gives them flexibility to ease Gaskin back in because he tested positive for COVID. He was not a close contact, which means he might not be fully conditioned. Like if Myles freaking Garrett can be like out of breath, Myles Gaskin can too. And like that's a concern. So I am going to lower Gaskin when he's back next week. If Gaskin, for some reason, can't go, Savon Ahmed would be in play. He lost some goal line work or some work to Matt Breida, but Ahmed had 23 carries and 3 targets. Also got, like I said, a good goal line work there. So Ahmed, if Gaskin plays, I would lower this entire backfield a little bit. Like I could still consider Gaskin because it's a 3-game slate, but it would be a downgrade for him from where he was previously for me. Cam Newton was his usual self. Just not that great this year. He finished with negative 0.16 passing net expected points per dropback. He did go deep a few times, but this passing offense just isn't good. Jacoby Myers had 10 targets. 4 of those were deep for 111 yards, but that's going to look appealing, but I just don't know how much juice there is for anybody here. I won't be chasing with Myers. I just don't want to use anybody in this passing offense. And again, like I don't know if this is Cam's fault. It's hard to separate player from situation. I just know the situation is bad and it's not going to get better. So I'm not going to expect a deviation in what we've seen so far. What we've seen so far is not good. Damian Harris was out, but the backfield was still split. Sonny Michel had 10 carries and no targets. James White, 2 carries and 4 targets. Michel did run pretty well, which is noteworthy, but this backfield just isn't good enough to chase, so it doesn't matter. Stephon Gilmore left with a leg injury and did not return. Early reporting is that it might not be season-ending for Gilmore. The Patriots' defense has been playing better recently, but losing Gilmore would be a downgrade for them and an upgrade for opposing offenses. So they play Buffalo on Monday night next week, not in the main slate, but keep that in mind for single game with the Bills offense and probably just go 4-1 Bills for every single game lineup for that game. Brandon, do you agree with my assessment that we should probably downgrade Myles Gaskin when he comes back based on the effectiveness and based on the fact that he was a positive COVID test?
Yeah, that's a big unknown. Testing positive. We saw Cam struggle with that for a few weeks. And then he improved, but then, I think the offense for Cam specifically is just not
it's rough.
Great for him. So yeah, I would be worried. And we don't have him on the main slate, so it's a little less of a concern because we do focus on the main slate primarily, but I think that that's a a great point. He shouldn't necessarily come back to his typical role.
All right, so let's go on to the Chicago and Minnesota game, a game we talked about on the podcast pretty positively, liking it from a game environment perspective, and it did come through for the most part with some good points, and the logical pieces within it went off. What'd you see in this one?
Yeah, looking at my notes on this one, it's kind of short, but I think that's because we know who to look at, and that's pretty much invaluable for daily fantasy, where you don't have to guess necessarily who it's going to be. There were 60 total points here, and two big games from the running backs. We've warmed up to stacking running backs together over the years. This was a good one to do it in. Dave Montgomery's Bears got the win, so I'll start there. Montgomery, your boy, 32 carries for 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. Didn't do much as a receiver, 2 targets for 16 yards, but didn't have to. And we have seen him get targets, so I'm not that concerned about that. He's actually had a really good role all season. I went back to look at when has his role sort of changed, and it's been pretty good all year. The efficiency
ever since Tariq Cohen got hurt, he's been a monster,
which was early. So he's been.
It's a 9 or 10 game sample where he's had this workload.
Yeah, he can get receiving work. He's getting red zone work. So I think he's pretty phenomenal at this point. I don't really need to elaborate. He's like a light feature back, basically. I mean, he's a feature back, but
and
with the offense, it's
the key for him, for me, was that so if you look at the most relevant sample for each running back on the main slate, he was second in red zone share among all running backs, at least among those with whose most relevant sample is at least 3 games, behind Dalvin Cook. His red zone, I know he didn't have any touchdowns for most of the year, but he's had work, and that's so valuable.
Yeah. So I think, Arrow continues to be up on Montgomery. It's not just chasing the production, it's looking at the workload. The Bears were really run heavy in this game, 42 rushes, 22 dropbacks. So the volume was not really there for the pass catchers. Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney each had 5 targets to lead the team. That won't get it done, but Allen Robinson's still really good and got to 83 yards, so kind of bailed me out a little bit in spots. But over the past 4 games with Trubisky starting now, Robinson is up to 28% of the targets. Plenty of high leverage looks for him. Mooney's at 16% of the targets, 5.5 per game overall. 2 downfield per game, though. Cole Kmet's 14%, which is fine for a tight end, but his ADOT's 3.7 yards, so I might be out on him if he's not going to get anything downfield. But I think the arrow's up, honestly, on the Bears offense. They face the Jaguars next week. Should be a pretty fruitful game. Allen Robinson revenge game, so I like that. Dalvin Cook, again, I thought you were going to say something.
No, I'm going to ask you about Montgomery's salary after this.
Okay. You're smirking, so...
Because I'm very excited to use David Montgomery in that game.
Dalvin Cook, again, showed why workload is important in daily fantasy. 24 carries, 5 targets for 34 adjusted opportunities. Ended up with 159 total yards and a touchdown. Again, don't need to dig too deep into him. He's a superstar. He will be a key play on the single game Christmas slate, that should be a good one. But we've actually gotten to the point where we prefer Justin Jefferson over Adam Thielen due to yardage, upside, and floor, and that was there this week. Jefferson had 11 targets for 104 yards. Thielen had 3 targets, 11 yards, and a touchdown. I did not find an injury on him, so I don't really know why it was such a big gap. But without Kyle Rudolph, Irv Smith got 4 targets, but so did Tyler Conklin, who scored on 1 of them. Since their Week 7 bye, excluding Week 12 when Adam Thielen missed, Jefferson now leads with 25% of the targets. Thielen's at 21%. That's 7.7 targets per game to 6.4 per game. They both have downfield work, but Thielen still has the red zone advantage. But I'm just good sticking with Jefferson if I can only pick one. I will have to sort of have a preference on that single game slate, and it's going to be Jefferson. And then Irv Smith, I know, was kind of a value tight end to a degree this week, but just has 1 game with better than a 15.5% target share, no more than 5 targets in a game. So I don't really want to keep chasing him, but he is a tight end. So, I mean, it's about expected.
He gets the yardage, which is valuable. But yeah, I mean, the share is never great. Also important, Tyler Conklin looks like Aquaman. Look it up. Anyway, name that salary for David Montgomery in Week 16 against the Jaguars. Chicago 7-point favorite on the road against Minshew Mania.
The number that came into my mind is 85.
I thought 83. Okay. He is $7,800. Ooh, I pulled up the full running back thing, which you had alluded to. It's Christian McCaffrey, maybe, Nick Chubb, and David Montgomery. David Montgomery might be the RB1 for the main slate.
Yeah, it would depend on Chubb's salary, but it would be.
It's high. So
I guess if you you read them in order, then
yeah.
Okay. Also, Thielen played 94% of the snaps, so
you're right. Like, we should just favor Jefferson. Like, it's pretty easy there. But I think that Montgomery, just keep on using him. There's no reason not to. Like, just keep doing it.
Especially if running back's bad.
Yeah, exactly. One game that could be interesting on the main slate next week is the Rams and the Seahawks. The Seahawks, though, potentially trending down, and we know the Rams are. So let's talk about the Seattle and Washington here. The Seahawks continue to be run-heavy, which is annoying. They had 12 passes to 13 runs on early downs in the first half. It really hurts Russ that they do this. He also just wasn't good again, so it's kind of like validating their decision. He lost 0.16 passing net expected points per dropback. It's a tough matchup, but also it didn't seem like DK Metcalf was at full health after getting dinged early. So we might want to downgrade this passing offense even a bit lower than we had it before. Metcalf had 6 targets while Lockett had 7. Russ had just 1 official deep throw. 2 others did result in the penalties. It's not like he was just like dinking and dunking, but they're not really throwing as deep as much. They're not throwing well. They're not throwing often. They may be hurt. This offense is trending down a pretty big way. The one exception may be Chris Carson, because Carlos Hyde had a long touchdown for Seattle. Didn't get much work outside of that. 2 carries and 3 targets. Chris Carson, 15 carries and 3 targets, and played 70% of the snaps. His previous season high was 63%. So I'm going to bump Chris Carson up. He gets targets from Russell Wilson. It's a good offense. So I think this is a situation where we actually do need to push him up a decent amount, because that snap rate went up, and he hasn't had good snap rates with Carlos Hyde this year. He did Sunday, and I think that's noteworthy given the target load he has gotten for this year. Dwayne Haskins threw 55 times. He was about the same as usual. He had a really bad pick, which is normal, but he was at 0.04 passing net expected points per dropback. That's better than Alex Smith, so it's not necessarily a downgrade to have Haskins in there. Or it's not an upgrade necessarily, but it's definitely not a downgrade for me. Haskins also really pumped volume to Logan Thomas and Terry McLaurin. Thomas had 15 targets. McLaurin had 12. Cam Sims had 8, while J.D. McKissic had 10. Thomas went for 101 yards, which is awesome for a tight end. McLaurin went for 77, which is at least better than what he was doing, the past couple of weeks. So I think I'd prefer if Haskins keeps starting. It'd make me a bit more willing to target Thomas and McLaurin. But I just don't think it's a huge difference. I do think it's better for them if Haskins starts, though. J.D. McKissic lost out in a touchdown to Peyton Barber, but pretty good workload here. He finished with 13 carries and 10 targets. He had 107 yards from scrimmage and scored. That's always my concern with those guys who get most of their work via the passing game is yardage upside, but he actually had some. I think we can legitimately consider McKissic if Gibson misses another game, but it seems more likely that he is back for that one. That's against the Panthers, so it'd be interesting at least. But we'll keep tabs on that. I think that McKissic is trending up and at least worth considering. But Brandon, this Seahawks offense, we've been kind of sounding the alarm bells for a month and a half now. But we keep adding reasons to be concerned if DK Metcalf isn't healthy. So are you also just very, very wary of this offense right now?
Yeah. Over the past 5 weeks, I now have the Seahawks at 29th in pace between when their win probability was between 20 and 80%, and 25th in pass rate. Mm-hmm. It's a very different team. Their salaries haven't fully adjusted for that. They probably won't, because they'll be, you can't make DK Metcalf like a $7,000 receiver. It's not that he should be there, but you're basically just paying for the hope of a return to form, and I think there are enough reasons not to buy into it. So I don't really have that much interest overall.
Yeah, it's tough. Because again, I would like that Rams game next week because I think that the Rams offense is dangerous. I think they should be able to move the football there, and it could.
They should have been able to move the football against the Jets.
I mean, but like they have moved the ball against other people.
Yeah,
like it's
but
not
they should
like
have been able to move the ball against the Jets.
I know, but their expected yardage is not 0. It is not outside of the range of outcomes.
The Jets' expected offensive yardage output is also
just saying
0.
we shouldn't write off an offense because they have the ability to bust. Because every offense has the ability to bust. Cam Akers will be a focal point again next week. So let's move on to Jacksonville at Baltimore. Brandon, Lamar Jackson is back. Kinda, maybe. What'd you see here?
This game went about as expected. 40-14 win for the Ravens. Lamar definitely getting healthier, or at least running more. Ran 10 times for 35 yards, but also had a touchdown. Now has 9+ carries in 8 straight games with an average of 73.4 yards per game in that sample, which is close to the equivalent of 2 passing touchdowns per game from his rushing alone. Rushing matters. That's why Russian quarterbacks are a cheat code for.
I said Russian for a second.
Do we have any Russian?
I'll think about this. Okay. Bruce Gronkowski? I don't know. Actually, whatever.
It was a quick but weird pull all of a sudden.
Is that Russian? I don't actually know.
He threw 22 times, which is pretty typical, but had 243 yards, 3 touchdowns on an extremely efficient day. And we got another Marquis Brown game. 7 targets for 98 yards. Only Mark Andrews with 5 targets also had more than 3. So it's kind of back to like the 2019 Ravens. Brown's role shifted in week 12 due to COVID absences, but in 4 games since then, he has 37% of the targets. That is only 7.3 per game, but it's a really high market share. Lamar can be efficient still. He's not as efficient as he was last year, but combined for 2 high leverage looks per game in that sample. And then in the 2 games specifically with Mark Andrews and Willie Snead back, Brown still leads with 30% of the targets. Andrews is at 26%, which is 5.5 per game. Snead's at 14%. So I'm back to believing in Marquis Brown a little bit more, or a lot more than I did early on in the season, because it was basically 0 for me. But I think it's just Brown and Andrews as pass catchers, which is pretty typical. So they're easy to stack if you want to stack them. You don't have to. Without Mark Ingram, who was a healthy scratch, J.K. Dobbins had 14 carries, 64 yards, and a touchdown with 1 target. I believe it was the preview podcast where I said this, but I was like, he's going to get you 15 carries, no targets, and then whatever happens from there kind of happens.
It's like 5 straight games. You have that exact same stat line with no deviations in any category.
Pretty much, yeah. It's pretty identical. Gus Edwards had 9 carries, 2 targets. He's still involved. These types of backs, we liked Dobbins fine enough at 5,900 before value opened up. They just have a very narrow path to get to 20 fantasy points on FanDuel. They have to score twice or break a long play, which Dobbins can do, but he also has like goal line competition between Edwards and Lamar. So, they host the Giants next week. Could be a similar script, but I think Lamar's back. I think Marquis Brown is much more interesting now. The Jaguars are pretty toasty at this point. James Robinson got limited on the ground, 35 yards on 16 carries, but another good example of why receiving can help overcome poor rushing. Just 3 targets, but caught a 17-yard touchdown to give him another floor day. In better matchups, he's a borderline core play. Host the Bears next week, so it's not really that. And he did hurt his ankle. I don't know the extent of that injury, but if James Robinson's out, I wouldn't necessarily chase anybody else. Gardner Minshew had a really tough match.
Zigbo best ball teams, though, baby.
Yeah. Boy. I was all over the Jaguars' backfield.
Oh, yeah.
But
strong ones.
Yeah. Gardner Minshew had a really tough matchup, took 5 sacks and 34 dropbacks. Did wind up with nearly league average passing efficiency, though. And from what I did see from him on Red Zone, whenever they were showing this offense, he was trying. Like, he was making some plays. We joke about Minshew, but, I like this offense much more with him than without him. Problem is only Laviska Shenault got over 5 targets. He had 6 for 43 yards. DJ Chark, also kind of toasty, 5 for 53. In 2 games with Minshew back under center, Shenault leads with 21% of targets. It's 8.5 per game with some red zone work. Then it's Keelan Cole and DJ Chark at 17%. I need more efficiency from this offense. Perhaps if there's no Robinson, Shenault gets more carries, so he would be the most interesting, I think. But against the Bears, I don't have high hopes for the offense next week.
Yeah, neither do I. With Marquis Brown, I think that I don't know if it was like a confidence issue or what. He had a good role early on. Then his role scaled back when he had that game where he like complained about his role, and now it's surged back a bit. I don't know, like what do you deem the most relevant sample with him? Like, do you deem it to be every game he's played with Mark Andrews and Willie Snead? Do you deem it to be these two most recent games? Because like that's my issue is like I don't know because it's been up and down and then back up. Like I don't know where I want to set that most relevant sample for him.
It's tough. If I had to pick, it would probably be just the two most recent games with those guys, which is a small sample. But, at this point, we all know what everyone's season-long numbers are. It's digging into, like, where their actual changes. I think there might be a change for Marquise Brown now with 30% of the targets. Again, it's not a whole lot of targets, just raw targets because the passing volume is low. But I would probably say it's these past 2 weeks with Andrews and Snead back.
So you're buying back in? Or not? You're buying in for the first time,
basically. Yeah.
Okay. I think I would skew more towards the two most recent games than what he was doing prior. So I guess probably in the same area, but it's interesting. We'll see how that plays out. They get the Giants next week.
Throw me a salary.
I still can't go higher than like 6,000.
He's 62, so I think I probably won't have a lot of him.
But like he's in play there. Like if you're using, I think Lamar is viable in that spot if Daniel Jones plays, and I think that in those Lamar lineups, like we was talking about, like if you have 10 Lamar lineups, how are you allocating stacks? I would say probably like 4 Marquise Brown, 3 Mark Andrews, 3 naked Lamar.
I'd probably go like 6 naked.
Okay.
2 Brown, 2 Andrews.
Okay, that's fair. I can't push back on that at all. Let's move now to Philadelphia at Arizona. Speaking of naked quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts. Awesome. We were talking about this on Slack before the game, and I thought that his ceiling was a bit hard to envision because I thought he'd be like in the Taysom Hill zone where he would score between 18 and 24 points every week. And then he was the highest scoring quarterback on the slate. So you suck, Jim. I was wrong, and I'm okay with that. I know why I thought that. I was wrong. I'm okay with that. That's fine. I'm wrong a lot. So I was skeptical he could generate enough juice as a passer to have a ceiling, but he had 338 yards and 3 touchdowns. It was 0.21 passing net expected points per dropback. If you look at the 2 games combined, he's at 0.17 in his 2 starts. Carson Wentz was at negative 0.13 when he got benched. So, yeah, it's an upgrade. Hurts has upside. He ran 11 times for 63 yards and a touchdown in this one. He has at least 10 rushing points in each of his first 2 games. Shouldn't go too crazy, but I'm good taking the L there and saying that I was wrong on him, and he has upside, and this offense is a lot better with him. The problem is that the targets aren't very concentrated. Both Dallas Goedert and Jalen Reagor had 8 targets, but neither had more than 50 yards. Alshon Jeffrey and Zach Ertz were the leading receivers. Ertz had 7 targets for 69 yards, 2 catches. Nice. Jeffrey had 63 yards. So Reagor and Goddard are getting the volume, but they're not productive. So I'm still.
Reagor had a lot of in the end zone and near the end zone.
I don't want to use Jalen Reagor. Like I really don't. I have used Jalen Reagor more times than I want to admit this year.
He had 8 targets. He got at least 1 penalty called on him near the goal line. Could have been 9. I'm higher on Reagor. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. I interrupt you all the time. I've interrupted you like 16 times today. I've been self-conscious about it. So like, oh, I've interrupted Brandon a bunch. Anyway, I'm lower on Reagor than you are. I don't like the pass catchers here. Miles Sanders' role was still good, at least. He had 17 carries and 2 targets. He finished with 90 yards from scrimmage. He isn't perfect. The target total here was a disappointment, but he works. He's the only Eagle I want to use right now other than Hurts. I would consider Goddard. He did brick a couple of potential long catches, which is annoying, especially with Zach Ertz kind of slowly inching his way out of the grave. But like, I don't know, maybe it's Sanders for sure. Number 1 behind or outside of Hurts, probably Goddard 2, I guess Reagor 3, but I don't really actively want to use anyone here. You can talk me out of it in a second. But we thought going in, I got this one right at least. So we'll focus on this, not me being egregiously awful and wrong about Jalen Hurts. Kyler Murray was healthy, and he was. He topped 33 FanDuel points despite getting just 2.6 points from rushing. He had 10 carries, which is still very good. He did almost all the damage with his arm. He had 0.36 passing net expected points per dropback. It was a much-needed rebound. Sure, the Eagles were banged up, but we hadn't seen Kyler do this in a while, no matter of the matchup. So this offense is back to being really fun for DFS again, especially Kyler, and we have to stack him with DeAndre Hopkins because Hopkins had 11 targets with 4 deep. He had 169 receiving yards. That's good upside. So if they're going to give him deep targets, he'll be hard to top. That's the reason I've been lower on Hopkins this year is because they weren't throwing the ball deep to him. It was all these little Michael Thomas things, but now they're throwing deep to him. That's good. So I'm done being low on Hopkins until they start doing their dumb stuff again. This usage was good, and we know his floor is rock solid to begin with. So I'm bumping up DeAndre Hopkins. Christian Kirk, just 4 targets for 33 yards, didn't get any deep looks. I need to stop going here even with a salary low. I need to knock it off.
Self-exclude. He's running so many routes.
Self-exclude from using Christian Kirk. If that's an option, please alert me to it. Dan Arnold had 5 targets. 3 of those were deep, but ran around on just 21 of 41 pass plays. That's more than the 7 he ran last week. He's good when he gets volume, but the rates aren't high enough for me to trust it. If they go up, I'll buy in quickly. But I need to see it first. Chase Edmonds might have had a role change here, maybe not. He outcarried Kenyon Drake 11-10. That was on top of 5 targets. Edmonds played 53% of the snaps, and Drake was at exactly half. And I think that's enough to downgrade Kenyon Drake. You can move Edmonds up. It's possible his role expands more because he was banged up going into this one. But I'm not going at the point where I actively want to target him yet. It's at least close, but I'm not there yet. I don't think we can go to him yet. But talk me into Jalen Reagor. Go.
Well, I mean, if you have to play one,
I don't have to.
I know you don't, but we also find ourselves in that 5,000 range for receivers where we need an option, and he is the best bet for me for a big game. Out of these receivers, he can get downfield work. He was getting red zone targets. I think that he is easily the top pass catcher in the offense. That does not mean that I make him a core play, but his salary is $5,700 next week against the Cowboys. He might make lineups work, and I'm okay with that.
Jalen Reagor or CeeDee Lamb?
Reagor.
Okay. You had to think about it, though, so I think that means maybe we're closer.
It's not like I'm saying Jalen Reagor's
okay.
wide receiver 1 moving forward for the season. It's fair enough. We need receivers in that range. I think his workload is one of the better ones there.
Okay. I can agree with that then. But I still don't want to use their team for their pass catchers. Let's move now to the Jets and the Rams. I'm sorry that you have to recap this game because I know that you were equally high on Cam Akers as I was. I was trying to console you in Slack in the third quarter. I was like, oh, it's okay. There's a lot of time left. He's getting all the work. He's back in the game. So I'm sorry that you do you want me to take this one? I can.
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, sorry. Sorry, buddy.
Things started off great for me. But
yeah, me too. I had touchdown variance broken my way for the first time all year, and then I couldn't capitalize because of this stupid game.
Yeah. The Jets got their first win of the season. The Rams let us all down. I guess they play Seattle next week, so maybe it was one of those look ahead games. I don't know what else to say. I'm going to start with the Jets because they won. That's just the way that I typically do things.
They won. Air quotes.
Yeah. They ran 31 times, dropped back 33 times, gave Frank Gore 23 carries for 59 yards, 2.6 yards per carry, which is not a good stat, but 30% success rate, which is a better stat, and it's still terrible. They averaged 4.5 yards per play. Sam Darnold, though, was at least league average from efficiency. Despite the win, though, there's nothing worthwhile here. Jameson Crowder led with 8 targets, 66 yards. Ty Johnson had 6 targets and a touchdown. like the players we would have used were Denzel Mims and Brashad Perriman. They maxed out at 21 yards. Perriman had 1 target. What?
You know what I just realized?
What?
Next week is a Brashad Perriman revenge game. Oh my! And he had a contract issue with them because like they were gonna re-sign Brashad Perriman, and he like at the last second said no, like they had done something stupid. Oh my goodness! Brashad Perriman's going for $169 a tut. He's having the DeAndre Hopkins line next week. You heard it here first. I'm gonna have 100% Brashad Perriman.
Brashad Perriman or Jalen Reagor?
Brashad Perriman.
Okay.
All
right. We're good. They play Cleveland next week.
I've seen Brashad Perriman have a good game. To be seen on Jalen Reagor.
Okay. That's fair. I think I've seen Jared Goff have good games in his career, but this wasn't one of them.
I'm doubting it at this point.
Lost 5.8 passing net expected points against the 31st ranked adjusted pass defense. This was his first matchup against a bottom 8 pass defense.
All year?
Yeah. He had one against a bottom 10 defense, but not a bottom 8 defense, at least as current ranks are. So, I don't know.
Maybe
he looked lost. He looked lost.
Yeah.
Out there. Some of his – he almost threw a pick that Gerald Everett got tipped into his hands, and it was bad. Robert Woods led with 8 targets and a touchdown. Had a 40-yard carry as well. Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee had 5 targets. Higbee led the team with 67 yards. I mean, it wasn't a great game, but we have a big sample since a Week 9 bye for this team, where Robert Woods has a 27% target share since then, 10 targets per game, just a 5.6-yard ADOT, minimal downfield work for him. Kupp's at 20%, Reynolds and Higbee around 12%. So it's Woods, number 1, then Kupp. But in that sample, Goff has an 11% downfield attempt rate, a 5.7-yard ADOT. It's less. I mean, you can sort of take down efficiency, but if there are no downfield attempts and you're not efficient, like what's going wrong, basically? So that's a big concern for me. Cam Akers, the stat line wasn't amazing by any means, but there's still reasons to be high on him. He got hurt early, but did play 61% of the snaps. That's a great sign for me. They were trailing, but it wasn't Malcolm Brown out there. It wasn't Darrell Henderson. They had 21 combined snaps. Akers played 36. He had a rushing touchdown that got called back on a hold. So, it could have been better. The game just got out of hand. I still think the snap rate is very promising, and I hope everyone is just off of Cam Akers moving forward. I would love that. They play Seattle next week, which would normally be like a fireworks game, but these two offenses are trending down. So,
while you were talking, shockingly, I was not listening. I Googled the Brashad Perriman thing. It's because they traded for Odell. He backed out of the contract with the Browns. So, my goodness, he's going to go for 600 yards next week. Anyway, Cam Akers, name that salary next week against the Seahawks.
72.
I think he's like 78. The workload is still very good. And I feel more confident because we have one more week of sample. It was despite being hurt. I think they need him. He's still 67, though. Would you say he is the most undersalaried player we have discussed so far, excluding Tony Pollard?
I can't keep them all straight, but he'd be close to it. I mean, yeah. I think I would have a hard time putting him super high. Yeah, that's fine. I'll just say that and move on.
Yeah, I think it's.
I can't keep it all straight.
I'm going to have a lot of Cam Akers next week, and I am excited to be tilting again on Sunday. Let's move now to what was supposed to be the game of the week and was kind of weird and very long. It's a very long game, but the Chiefs got the win here in a fun game, but kind of a grind. The big news could be the status of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He left with a leg injury. X-rays were negative, but Ian Rappaport said Monday that he probably will not play the rest of the regular season. Le'Veon Bell got 15 carries, Darrell Williams 3. Bell had 1 target, Williams had none. I wasn't going here when it was 2 guys. If it's 1.5, I could probably do it. Looking back to that game where CEH was active but didn't play, in that game, Bell had 11 carries and 3 targets, 52% snap rate. On this team, I might be able to get there if the salary's low enough, but it's hard to view him as a priority because they might just throw 78 times, which they should, honestly. So
against the Falcons next week.
Yeah, and the Falcons they're a team that actively encourage you to throw against them. The Chiefs more than happy to oblige. So I would say you can use Bell, but just be wary of certain things there. The Saints basically sold out to stop the long ball to Tyreek Hill, and it was successful, but the Chiefs still got Tyreek 10 targets and Travis Kelce 12. Mecole Hardman had 9 targets for just 22 yards. It seems like they're just going to force the ball to Kelce and Hill no matter what and bless them for that. We can keep the status quo with those guys. I would not bump up Hardman. He had been playing limited snaps before this. It's a role change because Demarcus Robinson just keeps doing really dumb stuff. But it's hard to expect that to change really because Hardman wasn't exactly perfect in this game either. So to me, it's Mahomes, Kelce, Hill, maybe Le'Veon Bell, maybe Mecole Hardman, but not really into either of them personally. The Saints had a bunch of injuries at wide receiver, but Drew Brees, it didn't look good, but he was still decent in his return. Average 0.12, passing net expected points per dropback. With that personnel against a good pass defense, he could have been much worse. He also had an 8-yard ADOT, which for Drew Brees is up 2.5 yards. So I say we can be into this offense going forward. We'll have one more game at Tampa before they're back on the main slate because they play on Christmas. So I like this offense. And that means buying into Alvin Kamara and Emmanuel Sanders. Kamara, 11 carries and 6 targets. That is 23 adjusted opportunities, 94 yards from scrimmage. He did lose a short touchdown to Taysom Hill, which is annoying, but actually had a carry and a target in the red zone, and it wasn't bad usage. I would say I would view him the same way we did when Michael Thomas was out earlier, where he is just one of the best backs in fantasy with both a floor and upside, and the odds that he goes absolutely berserk on Friday, pretty high. Manny had just 5 targets, but he did well on those. I would guess he gets a pretty big role going forward with Michael Thomas in IR. Jared Cook, 5 targets, ran a good number of routes. I don't think Jared Cook is legally allowed to get more than 5 targets. He's on the radar because he's efficient and he gets high leverage targets, but he's not going to get good volume. So this to me is Kamara, a massive gap, Manny and Cook. I saw enough from that team in this game to feel good about them going forward. Brandon, if CEH can't go, where would you be on Le'Veon Bell?
He would be probably, based on just the first glimpse I have of the running back pool, he would be in play for next week. I'd have a hard time getting to a high salary for him, so I'd want to probably realistically cap it around 66 or 67.
Ooh, I'm actually lower than that.
For once.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of he should be CEH plus
he's 64. I thought 6,000 in my head. And if Cam Akers, I know this, I always tell you not to do this.
Last week. Oh, yeah. Okay, go ahead. If Cam Akers is 67.
So I'm saying that I'm not using that to set the salary in my head. I'm saying that I'm not going to prioritize him if I can spend $300 to get Cam Akers. So a little bit different, but I think that's a little high. It's a little high, but it's fine. He would be usable, but not prioritizable. Is that a word? Anyway, I think someone tweeted functionable at me last week, and I was like, thank you. The movement has caught ground. He would be functionable within the offense. How about that?
Yeah, well, now that we're to the final game, running back's not looking too hot, so He's probably more in play.
Well, let's talk about one of the guys who will be an interesting discussion there, and that's Nick Chubb, by finishing up with Sunday Night Football. Baker, looking good again. I love it. What did you see here?
This one got flexed to Sunday Night Football over the Cowboys 49ers. So,
there weren't great choices.
The Browns won 20-6. They were about even in pass run ratio, 30 carries, 33 dropbacks. Nick Chubb, 15 carries in positive script. Just 50 yards, 2 targets for 16 yards. He's like a Derrick Henry light. Played 59% of the snaps. The efficiency was fine, but without a long run, no touchdowns. Low odds of actual receiving work. He can have lukewarm outings. You would know more about this than me, but I think they were without their right tackle, and then their backup right tackle got right
So
guard.
their right guard was out. Their right tackle got hurt during the game,
like early. So,
the right guard. Yeah, he's playing. He used to be a tackle, but he's playing guard in this one. Okay. I don't know what Wyatt Teller's outlook is, but he's one of the best guards in football. So, it actually is worthwhile. And the Jets are a good rush defense too. So I think it would be noteworthy if he can't go.
Well, Quinn Williams did have a concussion, so I don't know.
True, that's true. No, you're right.
So I mean, who's to say? Who could say? Honestly.
Oh.
What?
I just Googled it, and it says Wyatt Teller should be back for the playoffs.
So bad news for Nick Chubb.
Bad news for lovers of good guard play.
Who isn't, honestly? If you're listening to a DFS recap podcast, your priority is probably guard. Trench, watching the film in the trench.
They said week to week. That could mean he's back next week. Although, they kind of need that game for playoff seeding because they probably don't want to face the Chiefs. So, also they don't. Never mind. Whatever. Don't listen to me. Go ahead.
Okay. Kareem Hunt just 33% of snaps. He's not really on the radar for me. Baker Mayfield very good in this game. 0.58 passing net expected points per dropback, which is about 4 times the NFL average. Over the past 4 weeks, with some good matchups, with a cherry-picked sample, he's second in the NFL in passing net expected points per dropback at 0.48, trailing only Ryan Tannehill. So that's a pretty fun stat for Baker fans. I know one of them at least. One of them is on the podcast. It is not me. So
one of them ignored all the things about Jared Goff and is listening intently to you talk about Baker.
Yeah. So I think that there are reasons to be in on this offense. Jarvis Landry led with 8 targets. Austin Hooper had 6. They both scored in this one. Rashard Higgins had 5 for 76 yards. Since Odell Beckham's injury, but in games with Austin Hooper, Landry has 26% of targets, just a 7.6 yard ADOT, which is close to league average, but for receivers, it's actually 10.5-ish. So we've seen him get downfield work in Cleveland, but it hasn't really been there right now, which is a little concerning. That's mostly going to Higgins, who has 2.4 downfield targets per game in this 5-game sample. He has a 14.9 yard ADOT, 18% of the targets, so he's viable right now. Hooper's a tight end with somewhat of a role, 12% of the targets, but 3.4 per game. I think I'll be in on Mayfield, Landry, Higgins against the Jets next week. Obviously, Chubb is playable, but his salary is $9,000, which is quite high for somebody who is pretty one-dimensional.
But he's like Henry. You said Henry Light, and the reason that they're comparable is that they both have paths to a ceiling.
Yes,
I don't think Nick Chubb's ceiling is 39 points, but he could be the RB1 in that slate.
He could be, especially with how it's setting up. So he's going to be a play out of obligation, more or less.
Yeah.
But if their offensive line's banged up,
it's not a bad week to spend in the mid-range or running back again. I think that's the way it's shaping up to me.
Well, to be fair, unless we get McCaffrey and Nick Chubb, you have to. So everyone else is below 8,000. So the Giants mustered only 2 field goals under Colt McCoy, who actually put up 0.17 passing expected points per dropback. No touchdowns, no picks, just 1 sack, so that helped the efficiency not be bad. Darius Slayton had 9 targets. Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram had 7. So we know where the ball's going for this team. There's just not a whole lot of efficiency behind those targets. 3 games ago, looking back, we saw Darius Slayton and his snap rate climb back up. So that's probably the best sample when he started playing 90% of snaps again. Was banged up in the middle of the season. Definitely did not look like himself. So in that sample, he and Evan Ingram are above 23% of targets. I think Ingram's actually at 24.5. They each have at least 1 downfield target per game in that span. But that's only 6 targets per game. I can't use them with McCoy, but I'd be fine, or I'd be better with them with Daniel Jones. And then, your boy, Wayne Gallman.
I thought you were going to say Sterling Shepard. I was like, wait a minute.
No.
No, you're right on Slayton, though. I agree.
Yeah. Wayne Gallman saw his snap rate drop to 43%. Alfred Morris had 7 carries on 13 snaps, just 24%. But if Gallman's not going to play the role he had, I can't go there. And they play Baltimore next week, so
yeah,
I'm not chasing Wayne Gallman either way.
Devontae Freeman's back at practice now, so I had Wayne Gallman in a toilet bowl for a dynasty league where the winner of the toilet bowl gets a the 13th overall pick in the rookie draft, and Wayne, he gutted me last night. So we're no longer on speaking terms. No longer my boy. He's been put in the Ian Poulter doghouse of shame. I agree with you about the Browns passing offense for against the Jets, because again, the Jets showed life against the Rams defense this week. They've been better when they've had all three of Perriman, Mims, and Crowder healthy, which they did this week. So I actually think the Jets will score enough to keep the Browns active in that game.
They got to put together a streak.
What's that?
Streak.
I don't think that's going to happen. But I think that's enough for me to be okay with Landry and Higgins. I think I'm a little bit higher on Chubb than you, but I agree he's very imperfect. Very imperfect. So I think that I'll be in there this week, and I'm looking forward to doing that. That's all we have for today. Brandon, any final thoughts for you before we close up shop?
It's going to be a short week. It's going to be a lot of scrambling we scrambled this Sunday,
Yeah. Gosh.
It's going to be more of that on Sunday. Keep an eye on playoff odds. We'll probably talk about that. I might do a trend on playoff odds for Thursday.
Yep.
That'll be relevant.
Also, scheduling
for Wednesday.
Scheduling note, yes, I don't want to work Christmas Eve. So we're going to be recording our week 16 podcast Wednesday. We'll be on Wednesday each of the next 2 weeks. So Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page. And then, of course, on the numberFire Daily Fantasy podcast feed. Immediately after, recap podcast. Again, next Monday will be our final one. And then Wednesday again next week. So Monday at 9 a.m., Wednesday at 10 a.m., for these 2 weeks to get you set for weeks 16 and 17. That is all the time that we have for today. You're on the week 15 recap podcast. Do not forget to subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. The Listener League is now posted. Go to FanDuel.com/league/Listener League. Enter there. $5 entry, 3 entries max, no rake. Also put a link up in the Week 15 recap post up on numberFire.com. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you as you fill out your Monday night lineups. We'll talk to you once again on Wednesday to preview Week 16. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.